Dutopia follows the journey of a family as they navigate their way through the turbulent ebbs and flows of two distinct periods of emotional strain that they encounter. This film gives an intimate insight into the relationships between mum, dad, and their daughter Lilli-Mai as they struggle to communicate with each other. We meet Lilli-Mai as a creative young girl with a vivid imagination and intricate fantasy world which provides an important refuge from the difficulties in her parents' relationship. Her parents, whose names are never mentioned, will be referred to as mum and dad throughout the film. When we first meet them, mum and dad are in their 30s, but towards the end of the film, we jump forward in time and are reunited with all the characters 16 years later. Mum and dad are played by the same performers, but Lilli-Mai is played by an actor in her 20s. Another character we meet in the film is Bunny, a dancer wearing a white rabbit mask over their head. Bunny is Lilli-Mai's energetic playmate, and it appears that Lilli-Mai is the only character who can see them. Bunny's movements are light, quick and bouncy. Bunny can usually be found applauding and gleefully punching the air as they cheer on Lilli-Mai, or in fits of giggles, their torso twitching and convulsing as they rock back and forth. The majority of the action takes place in the family home, which is sleek and modern in design. We spend some time in the living room, a white room with cream sofa. Lilli-Mai's bedroom, scattered with clothes, toys and books. We spend the majority of the film in the kitchen, a large open-plan space with a long wooden table in the middle. This kitchen is on an upper level with stairs leading down to other rooms including Lilli-Mai's bedroom. The dance within the film is woven into the naturalistic setting and performances, often used to express what the characters are struggling to articulate. Private moments, usually unseen by others, in which their inner turmoil is made visible. The movement fuses a mixture of dance styles, lyrical and flowing in one moment or jagged and staccato in the next. The family speak to each other, but we never hear their words. Captions and title cards are peppered throughout the piece, guiding us through the narrative. The distorted glitches of a videotape. A montage of candid family videos of Mom, Dad and Lilli-Mai having fun. The trio walk down the street with arms linked together. Mum sprays water on Lilli-Mai's hair as she styles it, carefully gathering Lilli-Mai's hair into a hairband. Dad films them all pulling faces at the camera. Lilli-Mai's tucked up in bed as Dad reads her a story. Mum and Lilli-Mai put the finishing touches to an angular white rabbit mask. The image snaps to black. Footage of ocean waves crashing. Dutopia. The image fades to black. On a suburban street, Mum is carrying a shopping bag as she walks alongside Lilli-Mai. As they round a corner, they meet a woman with a little girl whose hair is styled in an afro. The parents and children hug. Lilli-Mai beams down at the little girl and gently strokes her hair. The little girl smiles up at her. The families chat for a while, then part ways. They leave in opposite directions. The image snaps to black, a close-up of hands flexing as they prepare to make a meal. Mum wraps her hair around itself into a bun as she prepares to cook. A raw whole chicken. Mum mutters to herself as she cuts open the packaging and puts the chicken on a baking tray. She drizzles oil on it in the shape of a cross and adds seasoning. Then she drizzles a deep brown sauce over the chicken. Mum looks down at her handiwork for a moment, then goes over to Lilli-Mai, who's writing in a workbook at the kitchen table. Mum points to something in the notebook, then goes back to cooking. In frustration, Lilli-Mai flops her head back in her chair and places her hands over her eyes. As Dad walks in carrying a bulging white paper bag, Lilli-Mai jumps out of her seat. She excitedly gets some plates and starts laying the table. Dad gently ushers Mum over to a chair at one end of the table. She sits, a little reluctantly. Lilli-Mai rushes over to a chair at the opposite end of the table. After placing glasses for them both, Dad takes a seat in the middle. Lilli-Mai peers into the bag that Dad put on the table. He gives her a nod and they both get up and switch chairs, so that Dad is now sat in front of the bag. He's about to reach into it when Mum says something. He stops and starts taking off his coat. He beams cheekily at Mum, but she just watches him, unimpressed. We focus on Dad taking food out of the bag. He chatters away as he distributes the small foil-wrapped bundles. Mum regards him coolly, her eyes darting from him to her daughter as she listens. Sat between her parents, Lilli-Mai beams as she watches her dad pass out the food packages. She passes one down to her mum. Time slows. Mum stares intently as Dad and Lilli-Mai laugh together. Mum's expression is dispassionate, her eyes cold. She watches as Dad and Lilli-Mai bite into the food. With eyes closed, Dad flutters his fingers joyfully as he eats. Mum gets up from the table. Dad and Lilli-Mai watch as she tucks her chair in and leaves the room. Lilli-Mai looks to her dad, who shrugs. They both take a bite of their food. Title card, the morning after. Close-ups of items scattered around Lilli-Mai's room. Discarded clothes, a baby blue teddy bear, a notebook filled with doodles drawn in blue biro, and Alice in Wonderland written at the top of the page. Lilli-Mai smiles to herself as she doodles in her scrapbook with a black biro. Wearing pink PJs, she sits on the floor with one leg stretched out to the side. She points and flexes her foot as she draws, then dramatically curves her body forward, sweeping her arms out to the side with an elegant flourish. Lilli-Mai grabs some headphones off her bed and puts them on. With eyes closed, she sways her head. A person wearing a white rabbit mask is now on her bed, chuckling as they read a book. Lilli-Mai's arms glide through the air as she dances to the music in her headphones, and we see that in reality she is alone in her room. Lilli-Mai runs the biro along the length of her arm, across her torso, out towards us, and then down into her notebook, the curves of her movement complementing the squiggles in her book. Joyfully lost in the music, she beams as she arches her head back, rocking from side to side as she circles her arms over her head. Lilli-Mai smiles proudly as she holds up her notebook to admire her handiwork. She takes off her headphones and places them carefully on her bed. A short while later, still in PJs, Lilli-Mai gingerly walks up a set of stairs in her house. She yawns as she walks into the kitchen. Lilli-Mai starts opening cupboards, looking for something. She opens another cupboard and smiles. She pulls out some popcorn. Mum comes into the room just as Lilli-Mai takes a seat at the table to eat her popcorn. Mum places some notebooks in front of Lilli-Mai. Mum starts looking through cupboards as Dad comes in. He grabs his coat from off the back of a chair and starts putting it on as he wanders over to Lilli-Mai. He kisses her on the cheek as she draws in her notebook. He steals some of her popcorn, then goes over to Mum, who's standing at the sink. She holds a glass under the running tap. The glass overflows. She fiddles with something in her other hand. Dad touches her shoulder, but Mum pulls away. She leaves the room. Dad and Lilli-Mai shift awkwardly. Dad looks down at the counter and sees a large multicolored pill that Mum was fiddling with. He looks concerned. Lilli-Mai holds her workbook out to him. Dad takes it. Title card, later that evening. Dad's sitting on the sofa, his head resting on his hand as he watches TV. Lilli-Mai's lying upside down on the sofa, her head flopped over the edge of the seat as she munches on popcorn. They're watching Disney's Alice in Wonderland. Dad smiles as he watches the white rabbit leap into a hole. Lilli-Mai props herself up on her elbows for a moment and says something to Dad. He beams at her, then gets to his feet. Dad opens drawers in the kitchen as he looks for something. He finds some pill bottles and puts them on the counter. Carefully, Dad opens a pill bottle and tips out some multicolored pills. He stares down at them, his expression pensive. Later, he and Lilli-Mai are on the sofa when Mum comes home. Dad gets up as Mum checks on Lilli-Mai, who's fast asleep. Mum starts to leave the room, but Dad follows after and stands in front of the door, blocking her exit. Time appears to slow as the pair argue. Mum turns away from him, but Dad pursues her. Lilli-Mai's still asleep as their argument intensifies. Mum shoves Dad backwards as she tries to get to the door. Dad blocks her path. Suddenly, we're transported into Lilli-Mai's dream. Bathed in pink light, Lilli-Mai, with her hair in low bunches, is joined by someone wearing a white rabbit mask, Bunny. As her parents continue to fight in the real world, Lilli-Mai and Bunny dance around in her dream world. Bunny cheers supportively as Lilli-Mai grabs a piece of fabric, twirling it above her head and around her body. Bunny bounces excitedly as Lilli-Mai performs, singing into a hairbrush and spinning around. Holding a piece of fabric in each hand, she arches back and throws the fabric into the air. As Mum and Dad shout at each other, in the dream world, Bunny spins and accidentally knocks over a vase, snapping Lilli-Mai out of her revelry. Lilli-Mai and Bunny both look up suddenly as though listening to something. Dad's holding Mum's wrist. Mum eventually wrenches herself free and storms out of the room. Dad paces for a moment, then leaves the room, shutting the door behind him. Lilli-Mai wakes up from her dream, her eyes snapping open. As she hears footsteps, she snaps them shut again and escapes into her dream world. Dad gently shakes her shoulder to wake her. After a moment, Lilli-Mai sits up. As she gets off the sofa, Dad picks up his coat. Title card, the next day. Mum is asleep in bed. Dad is sleeping next to her. They face away from each other. Dad's eyes flutter open. Careful not to disturb Mum, he gingerly pushes himself up and swings his legs round so that he's sitting on the edge of the bed, feet on the floor. The camera stays in a fixed aerial position over the bed. We can see Mum asleep, but Dad is partially cropped from view, so we only see his left arm and leg. He strokes his thigh several times, then gets up, leaving Mum sleeping. After a moment, Mum opens her eyes. She turns and looks at the now empty space next to her in the bed. Slowly, she starts to move in the bed, pushing away the woolen blanket that covers her. With her arms and torso free, she shifts into the middle of the bed. Her movements are stiff and laboured as she pushes against some invisible force. Rolling onto one side, her hands reach out and push, then jerk back in a glitching movement. The movement travels along one arm, which she extends behind her as she rolls her shoulder forward and back. Mum sinks back into the middle of the bed. With clawed hands, she reaches along the front of her body and then clutches her side. Her body tenses and writhes. She grimaces. With one hand clamped around her wrist, Mum extends her arm and circles her free hand. Her expression is pained, her head arched back. She slides down lower in the bed and arches her head back. Keeping her elbows bent into the mattress, she reaches her hands up. Lying with her knees curled up and hands gently crossed on her chest, Mum closes her eyes and becomes still. The image fades to black. Lilli-Mai's in the kitchen. She wears a green onesie with the hood pulled up and large goggly eyes on the hood. She smiles cheekily as she places a bowl of popcorn in front of Dad, who's sitting at the table. Mum joins them and Lilli-Mai rushes over to her and gives her a big hug. Lilli-Mai guides Mum to a chair. Mum takes a seat at the table. She stares coldly at Dad as she pulls her chair in. Mum and Dad's eyes meet. Mum suddenly screams at Dad. Then we cut back to reality and see Mum staring impassively at Dad across the table. Bunny suddenly appears and starts helping Lilli-Mai in the kitchen. Bunny hands Lilli-Mai a bowl of raspberries which she places in front of Mum. Bunny and Lilli-Mai are a hive of activity as they bustle excitedly around the kitchen, Bunny grabbing items and then handing them to Lilli-Mai for her to place on the table. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread. Mum reaches her hand into the bowl of raspberries and grabs a handful. She starts to squeeze them and the red pulp drips down her fingers. Mum locks eyes with Dad and squeezes the raspberries. Bunny and Lilli-Mai stop and watch. Dad stands up from the table. He strokes Lilli-Mai's arms reassuringly, then goes over to Mum. Standing by her side, he leans over and gently places his hand over her hand that's squeezing the raspberries. Mum shifts awkwardly in her seat. Her eyes dart around for a moment. Then Mum leaps out of her chair and playfully wipes some red pulp on Dad's face as he tries to block her. Lilli-Mai joins in. It's a food fight. Lilli-Mai and Mum surround Dad. He tries to duck and weave out of the way as they smear pulp on his face and top. Now Mum and Lilli-Mai stand open-mouthed as Dad playfully wipes pulp onto their faces. Mum and Dad laugh together as they wipe the pulp off their faces. Unseen by them, Bunny and Lilli-Mai start to sneak out of the kitchen. Lilli-Mai looks back and smiles when she sees Mum and Dad hugging. She leaves. The couple squeeze each other tightly and we're suddenly transported to a cliff top overlooking the sea. Mum and Dad hold each other against the blustery wind. At the same time, they slide a hand down the other person's arm. Staying connected, Mum turns around, rolling her head across Dad's chest and then leaning backwards into him. Dad's arms are wrapped around her waist. The pair sway gently together as Mum reaches her elbows out to the side, then hugs herself. Dad plants a tender kiss on Mum's shoulder and we're suddenly back in the kitchen. The pair separate. Dad glances over at a packed duffel bag and a handbag tucked in the corner of the room. He walks away, leaving Mum standing alone in the kitchen, head bowed, lost in thought. Her head snaps up. Mum glances down the stairs. Bunny stands at the bottom of the stairs, but Mum doesn't appear to see them. She goes back into the kitchen. Lilli-Mai and Bunny are sitting on the sofa watching TV. Lilli-Mai stares ahead as she munches popcorn. Barney slaps their thigh and their body twitches as they chuckle at something. Lilli-Mai reaches a hand into the bowl of popcorn, and we snap to Lilli-Mai, who's now in her 20s, reaching into a packet of popcorn. Caption, 16 years later. Lilli-Mai sits facing a door with a sign that reads Audition in Progress. Still munching popcorn, Lilli-Mai walks into the audition room. As she makes her way across the space, she glances over at a panel of creatives sat on one side of the room. She gives a small, friendly wave to someone in the room and then takes her coat off. The side view of a woman who waves at someone across the room. Lilli-Mai joins 3 other women in the corner of the room. They give each other knowing looks and then suddenly squat in athletic poses. They're now all dressed in Spider-Man costumes. Back in reality and dressed in their own clothes, the women all laugh, smile and hug. Lilli-Mai watches from the side of the room as people chat whilst they wait for the audition to begin. She stands in the centre of the room. The other auditionees position themselves in the space. They all start to dance. Raising one arm in the air, they jerk their torsos and, keeping their backs rigid, lean over to one side. In time with the beat, Lilli-Mai jerks her head up to the side, then down again. Bathed in red and yellow light, the auditionees now look directly at us as they dance. Their movements are precise and slick as they jerk and pulse their heads, necks and torsos to the beat. They kick a leg in the air, bounce their elbows out to the side and then twist their bodies away from us as they bounce their chests in time with the music. One dancer does some tutting moves, making a quick succession of geometric shapes and lines with their hands and arms. Standing in formation with hands flopped in front of their chests, the auditionees circle their arms around, then shake their torsos. They weave around each other's bodies in a rigid, jerky staccato. They freeze, their bodies wrapped around each other. Lilli-Mai stares directly at us. The red light gone, Lilli-Mai is focused as she carefully follows the choreography. Later, the group of friends are now relaxed. Slow motion footage of them dancing and freestyling together, enjoying each other's company. They're all smiles as they playfully dance together, shaking their hips to the music. Lilli-Mai gets a call. She looks pensive as she talks on the phone. She says her goodbyes to the group and makes her way out. At home, a tablet of multicolored pills lays tipped over on the kitchen counter. A family photo of young Lilli-Mai hugging her parents. Mum and Dad are in the kitchen when Lilli-Mai comes home. Dad paces nervously. Mum gently wipes something off Lilli-Mai's face. Dad helps Lilli-Mai take off her coat. Dad bops awkwardly across the room. Mum stops him. Lilli-Mai looks expectantly at her parents. As Mum starts speaking, Dad and Lilli-Mai join her and sit at the table. Lilli-Mai listens intently as her parents take turns to speak. Dad shifts uncomfortably in his chair as Mum speaks earnestly to Lilli-Mai. With eyes wide and brows furrowed in confusion, Lilli-Mai looks up at her parents. Mum is now standing. Gingerly, she goes over to Lilli-Mai and reaches out to touch her hand, but Lilli-Mai pulls away from her and storms out of the room. Mum gestures for Dad to go after her. He obediently does so. Outside, Lilli-Mai tries to hide her tears as she strides down a suburban street. She bumps into a stranger, spins, and is now on a cliff overlooking the sea. Confused, she staggers a little as she looks around, trying to get her bearings. A flash of Mum and Dad hugging tightly in this same location all those years before. Young Lilli-Mai also appears in this place. Her expression is dispassionate as she watches her older self. Lilli-Mai starts to run towards her. Suddenly, Bunny appears and lifts Lilli-Mai onto their shoulder. Lightning flashes in the sky as Bunny carries Lilli-Mai back to where she ran from. Candid home videos of young Lilli-Mai playing and dancing with Mum and Dad. They smile and pull faces at the camera. On the cliff, Bunny hugs Lilli-Mai tightly. More home videos. Lilli-Mai and Mum hold the white rabbit mask as they lean against a wall. Lilli-Mai and her parents walk down the street together, arm in arm. They smile at the camera. On the cliff, Bunny takes off the rabbit mask. Lilli-Mai walks over to him. It's a young man with short dreads and a short beard. He looks down at his body. A ripple of movement passes along his arms and down his torso. As the wind buffets her, Lilli-Mai spins on the grass, sweeping her arms forwards as she undulates through her spine. A split screen. On one side we see young Lilli-Mai doing her homework at the kitchen table, with Bunny skipping and bouncing behind her. On the other side of the split screen we see Bunny dancing alone, writhing and undulating, their movements slow and sustained. On the cliff, the young man spins, reaching their arms forwards, then waving them frantically in the air. Another split screen. Bunny helping young Lilli-Mai make her bed, and also Bunny alone slumped across the bed. On the cliff, the young man's movements become increasingly chaotic as he swings his arms around his torso. Hugging himself tightly, he falls to his knees. Split screen. Young Lilli-Mai and Bunny sit on the end of Lilli-Mai's bed, and also Bunny in exactly the same position, alone. On the cliff, Lilli-Mai reaches out and touches the young man's cheek. We snap back to the suburban street to find Lilli-Mai facing the young man. He's the person who bumped into her. He reaches into his pocket and offers her a handful of popcorn. She takes some. They stand facing each other. Dad comes running over and places a reassuring arm around Lilli-Mai as he guides her back to the house. As they leave, Dad gives an appreciative nod to the young man. Mum is outside too. She looks over at the young man, who gives her a nod. Mum smiles at him, reciprocates his nod, and starts to follow after Dad and Lilli-Mai. The young man watches them leave, then turns and walks away. His pace is relaxed and unhurried, walking slowly and taking time to look at the houses and trees that line this suburban street. He nods at a passerby. A friendly smile spreads across his lips as he takes in his surroundings. Growing in confidence, he waves and later blows a kiss as he walks. We pan up to focus on the blue sky with a scattering of clouds. Title card, Finn. A production by Latisse. Cast: Mum, Ekin Bernay. Young Lily, Ruby Ann Charles. Dad, O'Neill Rochester. Bunny, Tyrone Isaac-Stewart. Older Lilli-Mai, Misha Barnes. Film director, Ben Williams. Cinematographer, Zeta Spiraki. Creative director, Latisse Rhoden. Assistant director, Victoria Shulungu. Produced by Latisse Rhoden and Victoria Shulungu. Written and cast by Latisse Rhoden. Sadler's Wells Digital Stage,